I just love seeing that one rental at a time idea, framework, methodology, if you will, is gaining traction with more and more people kind of picking it up. We have a great guest who reached out to me on Instagram, shared a wonderful video summarizing some of his thoughts on one rental at a time. And I asked him would he come online, and he said yes. So let's welcome Andrew to the show. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm pretty good, Michael. Thank you for inviting me. Glad I'm here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for doing that video. It was very nice to hear and see. Let's do yourself a favor. Introduce yourself to the audience, your story, and then we'll get into more details.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm Drew. Actually, you know, military. I kind of ran into one rental at a time way back when. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to go right to the story and
Go for it. Go for it.
so I was actually raised a little differently. I was raised very anti-credit, very, you don't buy anything with credit. You don't buy anything unless you have cash for it. And, so my finances, coming up as a kid was actually pretty good. I've had a job since the age of 12. My father's really big on working and really, really ground that work ethic into me, even from a very young age. And, several years ago, I joined the military right at 18, deployed, came back Afghanistan, got married pretty early. So, my wife's the same wife that I actually dated back in high school. So we're, high school sweethearts. So married over 10
Nice.
years, kids. And, I think around the age of 25, we're just kind of going through life and going through our thing. And, one day I just woke up and I was like, man, if I want to retire at some point, I got to make more than what I'm making now. And we really have to just start making some changes. And I didn't really know where to go or what to do. So I just went where probably most people go to, which is, YouTube University, and started looking up like, all right, what should I do? Am I saving more? Am I, am I buying something? Where do I even start? And there's really just a big puzzle piece of just, where do I go from there? And it really just opened up just a network of everything just bloomed all of a sudden, and you found so much information online. And I didn't, then I actually ran into Rich Dad Poor Dad, very, very much like yourself. And everything that I had been taught of anti-credit, no, don't get into debt, no debt. And it kind of came crashing down after I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad. And it was just, I was like, man, I think what I learned later on was like the principles of no debt were good as a younger man growing up.
Sure.
So not buying something that you really don't need. But I think the concept of growing wealthy and becoming financially free, it was kind of like a must that you have to have some form of debt, of good debt and then bad debt.
Yeah.
And, from Rich Dad Poor Dad, I just, from there, I actually ran into your channel, one rental at a time. One of your videos popped up kind of out of nowhere. And I watched it. I was like, man, this guy's really interesting. Let me start. At that point, I was following a whole bunch of financial channels, but yours really connected because kind of like your backstory where, you were kind of doing the same thing, grinding through at an older age, around, I think it was 30. And then you're like, yeah, it's kind of clicked the same way. Like, where do I go from here? Am I going to be grinding it out all the way into my 50s and 60s and never be able to stop? And I think that's probably what, I think scared me the most was, will I have to work till I'm 70? And that really terrified me. And I was like, and that's what really pushed me to your channel. I was like, all right, where do I get that mentorship, and where do I get that advice from that's good, that actually works, and filtering out the really crazy, risky stuff to the point where, all right, this is manageable, this is doable, and there's proof, and kind of like proof in the pudding that this actually does work. And that's what kind of drew me to your channel.
That's awesome. Well, it's so nice to hear somebody who creates a lot of content, right? 5 or 6 videos a day. I realize I create a lot of content. I just never know when something's going to click with someone.
Yeah.
But hopefully what you've seen over the years is my principles really don't change, right? Get a
No.
buy box, look at it every day, understand average, live below your means, needs versus wants, all these things that we talk about really don't change. I try to use different vocabulary. I bring on other experts because you just never know what's going to click. So it's fun to hear that it's actually working. So that's cool.
Well, yeah, the consistency in your videos is really it's very calming in a sense. Like, all right, there's not big changes happening in how he's doing it. This is consistent from almost point A to point Z. You're constantly saying essentially the same stuff, modifying with the market. Of course, you gotta be flexible, but essentially saying the same stuff. You're doing the work, you're studying your market, you're making your buy box, and then you're going for it, and you're finding those good or essentially great deals now, and you're just being patient and not just throwing yourself into stuff just because you just want to do a deal.
Yeah. That's again, this in it's going to get really exciting for people who do the work. I know it may not feel that way right now, but this is my third really big, maybe fourth big kind of market shift. We're going into a recession, or what Greg Dickerson calls the bad times. And as Warren Buffett just said this weekend, value investing, which at the core of my great, good or great deals, it's value investing, right? We get the opportunity to buy assets on sale from people who do dumb things. That's
Yeah.
essentially what Warren Buffett's methodology is he stacks cash and buys when somebody else does something stupid. So, there's going to be plenty of opportunity, I think, over the next couple of years if you're disciplined, if you do the work. I'm excited to see one rental at a time even be more impactful over the next couple of years. But it's been a lot of fun. So why don't we talk about a couple of a deal that you put together, your first rental property? I hear there's some interesting twists and turns in that.
Yeah, so my first property on my channel, I talk about my rental property that I bought, but my first ever property was back when I was around 21, 22 years old, 2012 to 13, around that time frame. So a little while ago, I was pretty young. I just got back from a deployment. I moved over to Augusta, Georgia, and me and my wife had just got married, probably about 6 months to a year prior. And we're like, man, we got married. Let's kind of do the natural American dream. Let's go find a house. And so we go looking and we find this, we search quite a few houses. And at that time, I didn't have, the knowledge or the wisdom to be like, all right, we should probably be looking at a rental, something that cash flows, something that we can maintain when after we leave here, because in the military, a lot of people know we move around a lot. And so we went for we were just our forever home. And at that time, we were just so naive that not to realize this is not the forever home. This is just a temporary stop in our lives that,
Right.
where we need to go. And so we started looking around and we searched quite a few houses and we found one. And it was, again, around 2012, 13 time. And it was right there, probably within, 2, 3 blocks of the Savannah River, red brick, colonial style house, 3 bed, 2 bath, absolutely beautiful home. And we really bought it essentially because we fell in love with it. It wasn't even at that time, even though it was an amazing location, amazing property, it just got renovated, the people were moving out. We didn't, we fell in love with it, and that's why we bought it. And we lived in it for probably about a year and a half. And sure enough, I came on orders, had to go to Korea for a year, and then come back. And then we got orders again to move down south, even further to Fort Stewart. And we had to rent the property. And what we didn't take into account was, again, had I done the work and I knew the knowledge at that time, I would have known, hey, the flood insurance is pretty high for that area. It essentially broke even on the property. And, so we had to move down. That flood insurance alone was just $200 a month
Oof.
back at that
Ouch.
time. Yeah. And, I guess they haven't had a flood in, 70, 80 years, but for some reason it was pretty high. But yeah, so essentially we rented it and it broke even. And whenever there was a repair, we were coming out of pocket on a very, I was an E4 at the time, so a specialist making not a whole lot of money. So every time a repair would come up, we come out of pocket for it. And
Been
luckily
there.
yeah, it was rough. It was an alligator, and it was
Yeah.
it
No
was eating
alligators, people.
no alligators. It was just eating up,
Yeah.
some of our savings, and but we stuck to it. I was like, all right, maybe this will turn around. And I guess it just didn't dawn on me to just why don't you do more research and figure out what's going on here. And we rented that property for probably about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And that, because it was just breaking even, I feel like that really set me back because
Sure.
I didn't experience the cash flow. I didn't experience the big, I think it was still relatively close to the 2008, 2009. The market was still recovering. So I got a great deal on it. I used a
Yeah.
VA loan, very little out of pocket to get into it.
Nice.
And at that time I had, saved up savings that I probably could have put down for the down payment, and I could have cashed up from day one. but I didn't realize that. I thought, hey, very little out of pocket, get into a property that we love, and it'll all go out, it'll all work out from here.
So how does that property end? Do you still own it today?
No, I sold it 2019,
Okay.
a little early before, essentially right before COVID. I did make money off of it, so
Yeah.
it did go up in value at that time. And I used that money to actually kind of kickstart the next financial chapter of our lives at that point.
All right. Well, let's talk about that. So um, you sell that. I assume because it was your primary, you were able to take out the profits tax free. I would
We
guess.
were, yeah, yeah. There's a military, 121 exclusion,
Yep.
where you have to, if you live 2 years, the last 5 years. Now the
Yep.
military, there is a military clause in there where if we get orders, it actually excludes that as well, to where we didn't
Nice.
actually pay taxes. Yeah, so really, it was essentially tax-free money that we got, and then the big paycheck, that
Yeah. Woohoo.
yeah. And at that point, we put, and again, I still really hadn't discovered that was the really start of the financial around that time frame. And I was like, all right, what do we do with this money?
Right.
And so we needed to put down payment on a car that we needed for a van. We were, starting a family.
Sure.
And next we put it into the stock market.
How did that do?
So it actually worked out pretty decently.
Oh, good for you.
We actually had yeah, I ran to kind of like that financial start where I ran to Warren Buffett, and I really
Oh, nice.
connected with Warren Buffett. So I have the intelligent investor behind me. Really,
That's a good book.
advanced book if you are just starting out. And I ran to like Phil Town, Rule One Investing, which really worked out. And
Nice.
so I got into the market essentially right around that 2020 mark when it all crashed, is
Oh,
when I
good.
started going into it.
Oh,
Yeah, and I was like, all right, is this the big crash that Warren Buffett talks about? Am I taking the risk? And so we started very small. We didn't put the whole amount in there. I had to convince my wife to even put the money in there, because we were raised very,
yeah.
anti. We weren't really, my families aren't really big into the stock market. They're like, oh, it's gambling, it's gambling. And even though 401ks are stock market, and
Yeah.
that kind of, but so anyway, so we get in there. I put like $5,000 into the stock market. I bought some stuff, and using Warren Buffett's method, I was doing the evaluation in Phil Town. I was doing the evaluation on it, doing the research,
Nice.
spending the time, and essentially that the first stock doubled out of
Nice.
nowhere. And so I was like, all right, it's at value. Warren Buffett says that I can hold it or sell it. So I actually decided to sell and then move it to the next one. And it was kind of like I hit that perfect plateau of one stock after another, and I had an amazing return that year, and essentially went from like $5,000 to like close to $100,000
Nice
within
work.
within the year. And then after that they started raising interest rates, and much like your story, it went back down again. I was like, oh, why is this not continuing up? And where do I go?
Oh, I know
And
that story. That's just somebody I know has that exact story. Yes.
yeah, and I was like, this is probably not the forever method I want to use. And I tell you, when it went down, that really hit me like a brick. And
Yeah.
luckily we were still positive. Obviously, we started out with a very low amount, and that's when I was like, all right, maybe there's other investments that I can jump into. And that's where I found one rental at a time. I started looking at Rich Dad Poor Dad, and they started talking about property. I was like, all right, property is the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, folks, if you don't know my story, kind of similar, except 20 years before, I took 7 grand and over about 2.5 years turned it into 200. Then that 200 very quickly in the dot-com crash turned into 40. So uh, yes, I turned 7 into 40, which is okay, but that's not how I look at it. I look at it as turning 200 into 40. So I
Yeah.
lost, I don't know, 80%. So you took 5 into 100. When did you realize and got out? How much did you exit with roughly?
It's around the 50 mark.
That's not
Yeah.
bad. So better than
Yeah.
me. So you
It
lost
was.
50%. I lost 80%.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't hurt any less. Like saying,
No,
oh, well, we started with 5 and I'm still up. And it doesn't hurt any less by going
no.
from 100 to 50.
And
And
I will always remember going from 200 to 40. I won't
yeah,
remember 7 to 40.
no,
Yeah.
not at all. It's great for a moment, but yeah, the decline is more painful than the incline, I
Oh,
feel.
for sure, for sure. Well, now you're into real estate. So you read the books, you find one rental at a time. Did you first get a buy box, or what really resonated when you started looking at properties?
What really started resonating was actually the tax stuff.
Oh, okay.
I was like, oh, okay, like so a lot of my gain in the stock market was in like a Roth IRA, and I had
Oh,
moved
okay.
money in there. I had money in there, so I kind of moved it around, and I had a regular stock account as well, but mostly in the Roth. So I didn't have to really pay a whole lot of
Oh, that's good.
taxes. Yeah, it really worked out. And so when it really was the tax stuff, I was like, all right, well, I heard mentioned on a video, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And I was like, man, that makes so much sense, and they use the acronym is, who's richer, the guy who makes 200 but keeps, 50, or the guy who makes 100, and keeps 70. And I was like, it makes so much sense. And if you're on a lower base income, and it makes even more sense because you're like, you have to keep as much as possible in order to really continue on and to keep recycling capital. And so really it was the tax stuff. I got into it and I was like, wow, I never knew this was even a real thing.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of what made me go into real estate. And, again, because we had that experience with the old property back in Augusta, Georgia, you know, we were paying repairs on it and constantly, it really just set us back of like not looking at properties
Sure.
for a long time, several years after that. And, it was really the conversation was to convince my wife to be, like, hey, we should probably reevaluate and relook at real estate investing in the right way and not in the wrong way that we were doing before. And then trying to, I think that's the biggest thing is trying to get your spouse on board for it because, she feels the pain just as much as you did. And she
For sure.
remembers as much as you did as well. So if you're studying, you're reading, you're revamping your mind and relearning your whole concept of how money and real estate works. Maybe they haven't read the books yet, so you have to convince
Yeah.
them as well and say, hey, this will work if we do it this way this time.
Yeah. It's funny. Your story reminds me of one of the chapters of my second book, right? My second book is 15 Conversations with Real Estate Millionaires. One of the stories in there was a gentleman who I think they actually, yeah, they got into a rental, low quality, didn't know what they were doing, total headache, total cluster, lost some money, not a lot, but some. And that one experience, because they gambled basically, they didn't do the work. They didn't come back to real estate for over a decade,
Yeah,
right? He calls it his lost decade. You
yeah,
can do real estate really, really wrong. Just because you
yeah,
have the money doesn't mean anything.
yeah,
You really got to understand your market. I run into too many people with a little bit of capital that it almost feels like they have to run away from it. They just got to get rid of it or else they're going to spend it on something.
yeah,
Um, and I just want you to sit back, relax, realize you're going to pick up a brand new skill. You don't learn golf or singing or instruments or a second language in a weekend. It takes time, it takes repetition, but it is possible. You can
yeah,
learn a second language. You can learn an instrument. You can learn to be a good real estate investor. Yeah, it's just focus and daily discipline. It's not sexier than that. Everybody wants to be sexy. Everybody wants it to be quick, but only the people that do the work and then just stay at it. All right, the first 3 or 4 years are slow, but it does work, right? If you own assets that cash flow with fixed rate debt, it's hard to lose unless you're gambling or getting alligators or doing something like that.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it resonates too, where you say it's slow, because after I found the one rental at a time, and getting the buybacks and doing the work and studying your market, I was in Killeen, Texas, and at that time the market was starting. It was already hot. It was already starting to peak. I found it around 2020, and then around 2021, as you know, it was high and flying every
Yeah.
property above asking, and it took a while for us to find a property. Like you think when you join a program, you're like, all right, it's going to work tomorrow, and it just doesn't work like that. And if you're going to do it the right way, you have to take the time to actually study your market. You have to take the time to do the work. You got to figure out what neighborhood you want to live at.
Yes.
what side of town you want to live in, and I took into account like, all right, I have a wife, I have kids, would I live in that area personally with my wife? And if I said no, then that's obviously not an area that I should probably be buying in. And I think it took us around a year to really, find a property. And at the time, like I said, I was telling you earlier, my wife was pregnant at the time. Was trying to convince her, like, once the spouses are accepting of it, once you're kind of just, like it's like a passing phase type deal. But when you're actually, hey babe, I found a property, then it starts to really get real quick. Like, hey, we're actually going to be doing this. And
Right.
like I said, at that time, my wife was, pregnant, and she was at probably around 6 months pregnant, and we were gonna, it took us a while to find the house. Once we found it, it was the property at the time was actually owned by a the sweetest Korean older woman that you've ever met in your life, and she was actually going home to be in going to go home to Korea. Her husband had passed away, and they had owned several duplexes, and they wanted to get rid of them. And so it popped on the market. And because I had, my buy box, and I had been studying the market for months and months before that, man, when I saw it pop up that day, I did the math on the spot. I was like, this is a good
This is
deal.
it.
This is
Yes.
it. This is mine. Like, I got to get this.
Oh, that's
I
exactly the
knew.
feeling I hope everybody gets. Right? Do the work,
Oh,
do the work. Oh,
yeah. And I knew at that moment, I was like, this is, I knew if I didn't make a offer on it at that point, I was like, I have to pull the trigger. I have to put my feet into the fire and just take the shot. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people have is taking the shot. Once you find it and it's good, take the shot.
take the shot.
And as long as you've done everything prior to that, you'll most likely be okay. Things happen, but most likely, I'd say 90% of the time you'll be fine. And so I walked in, I found it that morning. I walk in, my wife, she's 6 months pregnant, and I'm like, hey babe, I found a duplex. I want to go make an offer. And she looked at me and she goes, well, I don't know. I don't think this is a good time. And I was like, my heart sunk, and I was like,
Oh,
oh man, like, I can't just go buy, over $250,000 property without my wife supporting it. And for at that moment, I looked at my wife. I go, babe, when is a better time? When is a better time? And out of summer, I had some epiphany genius wisdom come out, and I was like, there's always, that's what I tried. I was like, babe, there's always a baby due. There's always a bill to pay. There's always a family emergency happening. There's always the sky is falling. There's always a war on or something like that. There's always something to tell you no. And there's always something to say, hey, this is not the best time. And unfortunately, when is that best time? And to her credit, she literally sat there for a second thinking, and I'm looking at her like, come on,
come
please.
on, come on.
And she looked at me and she goes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, go for it. Let's go for it. And there was just a moment I was like, that full backing, and people, I think a lot of people underestimate that, the
Oh
support of
no,
your,
without question, without question,
yeah,
it's vital.
yeah, exactly. Because if it goes south, that's your whole family's income. That's your savings. That's everything. It's like, where do you go from there? And we're young, so we're fine. But she said,
Yeah.
yeah, let's go for it. So I called the realtor, and I actually found it before the realtor did. And
Nice.
we got there same day. I found it that morning, probably around 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. And then I was at the property by probably 10 a.m. And
Perfect.
the lady, little Korean woman, sweetest little lady, she was there. Her agent was there. They were trying to move the property very quickly. And I had already set up my approved funding from the bank and everything. I had really great credit. And so I walked through the property, and probably within less than 30 minutes after I got in there and walked around, we already signed papers on a contract.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it was a duplex.
What?
What? Yeah, duplex, right?
Yep, correct.
What? So with like 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom? What are these duplexes like?
So it was a 3 bed, 2 bath on each side,
Nice.
1350 square feet around each side. One side had
Garages or carport?
a 1 car garage.
Okay, very cool.
One car garage.
What'd you get it for?
Uh, 285,000.
And I'm guessing you lived in one side and rented out the other.
Correct. Yeah, I used my VA loan to actually get into the property, $8,300 out of pocket, and interest rate at a 2.875.
Oh, sub 3. Look at you showing off, doing a little flexing. So that's wow, that's great. So what is a 3.2 rent for? I have no idea in Texas.
So at that time it was around 1,000. Well, correction, they're renting it for 1,000 on the other side, and at that time it was around $1,200 on each side
Okay. What
for
are
for a
they?
3-2 duplex side.
All right. So then you buy it, you move in.
Oh,
Apparently you move in. Yeah,
yeah, there's a
you
story behind that one.
go
Yeah,
ahead,
that's
just share with the audience.
yeah. So at that time, again, my wife was 6 months pregnant, and we were supposed to move into the property in October, and essentially the time went on. Is about a month before October came around, the the lady called the agent, and she's like, "Hey, I can't go home just yet. We're trying to still close on some properties. Can I stay all the way till December? And then essentially you can move in after December, after Christmas." And my wife was due in January.
Mm.
And so, having that conversation was
Yeah,
interesting.
interesting.
Interesting, yeah. And but we said, okay, we were trying to be flexible. We still had
Sure.
we were renting at the time, and we were still fine. And so essentially we stayed all the way till December, and then on January 1st, we moved into the duplex. My wife gave birth on January 9th.
Wow, 8 days.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So I'm guessing you closed and she did like a lease back from you, I'm guessing.
No, so we actually delayed the
Oh, you
closing.
delayed closing. Okay.
Correct, yeah. So we delayed closing all the way till essentially right after Christmas.
Okay.
And that's nerve-wracking as it is, because what if something happens and she's like, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
do this. I mean, we had signed paperwork,
sure.
uh stuff like that, like intent and stuff. But yeah, that's nerve-wracking. Like, man, I don't want this deal to go to waste. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So then after that, January 1st, we moved in. Credit to my in-laws, they helped me move in
Oh,
very
that's nice.
quickly. We got the house set up. Until essentially until my wife gave birth.
That's very cool. That's all family helping out. So you still live in that one today?
No, so I actually was there for around 8 months, and then we got orders to actually move up to Massachusetts in Boston.
Okay.
So
So
I'm
you
over
kept
here. I
it.
teach at one of the universities.
Very cool. So I'm assuming you kept it.
We did. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was, that was the one rental at a time. Was you buy, you hold,
Absolutely.
you rent out, and it cash flowed from day one. And that, I mean, it was really amazing, because when we went from paying, at that time, $1,400 in rent
Yep.
for, we had 4-bed, 2-bath rental that we were living in, and we moved into it, and we started renting out the other side. It was already rented. So
Right.
we were only paying around $700
There you
rent,
go. House
total.
hacking for the win.
Yeah, absolutely. And because our mortgage is around 1225 a month, 1225 a month, and the other side was renting for 1,000. So we just had to cover that little bit, and then a
Yep.
little bit of taxes, and we're good. And we get a housing stipend from the military to live. So that money that we were saving was all tax free to begin with, because pay taxes on it.
Yeah. Wow, house hacking for the military for the win. That's more important. People need to look at that if you're serving. Definitely look at VA loan, right? Sub 3%. You're going to keep that forever, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, I just don't see a scenario unless something just drastically changes. But I don't see a scenario where selling at sub 3% interest rate makes any sense at all. So it's you're winning on so many levels with that property, and today cash flow is around $664 a month.
Yeah. And has rent gone up at all or not yet?
Yes, it did. So when we moved in, while we were actually waiting to move in, the rent, that was like that big, it was like a 35% rent increase from like within like a year or two. And essentially now it rents. I have one side rented for 1,350 a month, and the other side rented for 1,300 a month.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. That's a
Yeah.
great story. So where do you go next, Drew? What's next on the agenda?
Well, I was hoping to do some house hacking up here in Boston, but as most people know, Boston's not the best market for house hacking or cash flow. So I right now I'm actually still looking and cleaning to buy the next rental or stacking cash, figuring out. I'm actually doing a lot more self-education. I'm reading a bunch of books, as you can see behind me. I read as many books as I can get my hands on.
I like it.
A couple of programs I ran to Pace Morby's Sub 2, creative finance. I think that's probably the way to go. I know you mentioned that a lot on your channel,
Mhm.
and yeah, I agree with that. And that's kind of what pushed me. I was like, all right, I need to learn, not only this, but just continuing to learn taxes and real estate, and then just doing the best we can.
Very, very cool. Well, you have a YouTube channel. You created some content about your rental. Why don't you tell people what it is so they can go look it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the Flick channel. So it's an acronym FLIK. So financial literacy is key channel. And I have an Instagram as well. It's a at Flick channel. So it's like after each letter it's a period, but yeah, at the Flick channel. So and that was part of it was, I really found in a sense my second calling passion. I absolutely love finances, and it's not just, you know real estate, and it's not just stock, it's everything. I love talking about it. And then if I felt like I wished I had learned a lot of this very early on. So that's why I kind of went towards the channel and stuff like that, and making the YouTube and Instagram, was to maybe I can educate other people, on it that haven't been introduced to it yet. And maybe my channel might lead to them doing the same thing and just getting started. So I'm still a baby, in my opinion, on the financial journey, and still learning. But hopefully I could get someone started even earlier in mine. And like I said, I look at my kids the same way. Like, I play financial games with them. I try to teach them investing versus saving, the difference. Yeah, and I hope that they can do a lot better than me at my age by then. So hopefully.
Well, Drew, thank you very much for what you do. It's amazing. Thank you for coming on One Rental at a Time. I appreciate it.